Welcome to The Coach Within. I'm your host, Coach Jedi, a podcast where transformation begins from the inside out. Here, we explore coaching conversations that unlock clarity, spark insight, and bring you closer to your purpose. Whether you're a coach, a leader, or someone on the journey of personal growth, you're in the right place. Each episode brings real stories, practical tools, and thought-provoking reflections to help you thrive in life, leadership, relationships, and dreams. Let's journey inward, ignite the coach within, and brave your story. One of the most common questions that often I've asked is, what is thought-provoking in the coaching process? Is it just a conversation? Is it a question? Is it the way we ask? Is it the way we communicate with our clients? Is it the way we lead our teams? Well, oftentimes, one of the greatest challenge in any form of conversation, it's how do we make it matter? It's not about trying to dress it in a certain style, in a certain nuance, in a certain way, or package the way we finesse words, but it goes more than that. So, in this episode, I want to focus our attention to something known as thought provoking conversations. What makes conversations different from regular conversations? One of the things that we have often faced with is, as a coach, as a leader, how do I create better conversations with our clients, with our teams, with our customers, with the people that surround us, the stakeholders, internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, future leaders, the next generation of leaders? How do we engage them that really matter? So, one of the things that has always kind of baffled many coaches, many leaders, it's really about making this conversation in an impactful manner. Recently one of the coaches who attended my program came to me and said, Jedi, how do I create such a compelling conversation that really engages not just the mind, but engages the heart and even engage the soul? And I asked him, I said, what kind of a conversation would that look like for you? So that individual replied me and said, wow, Jedi, if that were conversations that I had, I really wish that it could kind of bring a light to my heart, a little smile to my face, a little joy that just birthed from within. And I said, that exactly like how you expressed is what your clients, what the other party would love to experience as well. That is the power of conversations. Now, so today I want to kind of focus us on this idea of what makes a conversation seem powerful, or what makes a conversation create that lasting impact that pushes us or allows us to create in a space where we just pause, reflect, and just dive deeper within our hearts. And that kind of conversation, I call them thought provoking. Now, don't be baffled by the word thought and provoking, because whenever we hear such words, we think that, wow, it must be something about the way I craft my questions or the way I craft my conversations. Well, not quite. Because when you think about the word thought provoking, it goes beyond just bring a case or bring something that I say, but it really goes deeper to the heart of the matter, which is what makes a conversation special or what makes a conversation useful. And so we got to see, what is it that we want from that conversation. Oftentimes, as a coach, as a leader, as someone who's helped many people around the world, oftentimes the first thing the clients would all often ask me is this, Jedi, what I really want is to really create that breakthrough. So I'd like to show all of us here in this little diagram here. This diagram, you could see a little wall and like a little arrow piercing through the wall. And this is how many of my clients would describe to me and say, Jenna, what I really want is to be able to experience something like that, where I can really experience that little breakthrough moment with me and my clients, with the way I kind of engage life, the way I kind of experience my career growth. And often, most clients or most leaders, what they want to experience is a kind of breakthrough. They may use different words. They may say, I want to get better results. I want to get better outcome. I want to get better fruits. I want to get better rewards. I want to kind of overcome this challenge, this obstacle, and this thing is getting my way. And they would often describe it as something like a wall, a barrier, a hurdle, something that is almost impenetrable. And so that word breakthrough, it's the sense of breaking through that wall, overcoming that obstacle, leaping forward to achieve whatever that's on the other side of that wall. You see, as a coach, as a leader, what we often face with it's how do we help the other person? How do we help our teams? How do we help our customers? How do we help our clients create that breakthrough? But I realize too often, many coaches or many leaders, they fall into that trap of over focusing, over emphasizing on that breakthrough and forgotten about the process of breaking through. You see, what we want, it's not that breakthrough. What we want is what is on the other side of the breakthrough, the rewards, the fruits, the result of that breakthrough. Because the breakthrough is just that doorway that's open for us to enter. Very much like this picture here that you see. You see, it's not just breaking through that wall, but it's allowing us to reach to a new ground, a new horizon, a new field, a new place where we never quite achieved that before. And so that's really where we want to go. And that sense of breakthrough, it's what we're really talking about. And so this is why I'm so passionate about opening this podcast, really about sharing the coach within, because it's not whether you are a coach or you're a leader, but every one of us have the potential within to experience breakthroughs in our lives, in our careers, in our relationships, in our work, even in our passions and dreams. And I really hope that this episodes really support you in going deeper, in unraveling what makes a conversation special, what makes a conversation create that lasting impact, what makes a conversation have such a thought provoking process. So, you see, very much like the wall that's preventing us, we often get so caught up in that sense of is that conversation breaking through? Am I breaking through? So the anticipation of wanting to break through actually prevents us from experiencing a real breakthrough. So what do I mean by that? Well, for one, if you think about this, because we are anticipating that breakthrough or that image of the breakthrough or that sensation or that feeling of the breakthrough, and if we don't feel that, or if we don't see that, or if we don't kind of experience that, we equate that to I don't have a breakthrough. I don't have that. I don't have that clarity. I don't have that thing. So I cannot get the reward. But how many of us have experienced life before? Or it's not usually a complete kind of opening. Even that little gap within that wall allows us to gain some insight into the opposite side. And sometimes we thought that the way we want to get the breakthrough is through a certain path. But what really happens is I'm given the opportunity to kind of jump over the wall, to circumnavigate that wall, to overcome it through a different way, through different possibilities. So the traditional way it's that I have to do A to get to B. But what if the breakthrough is not about just trying to get from A to B? What if I could get a ladder to climb over the wall? What if I could get a pole to hop over the wall? What if I could crawl underneath the wall? What if I could get a big, like a big bowling ball or a dynamite to explode that wall? And you see, that breakthrough, if we're so over-fixated, we are fixated with a certain solution. And as such, we prescribe a certain measure to that solution. When in fact, what we want, it's not the solution. What we want is the result, the outcome, the byproduct of that breaking through. So you see, too often, many conversations are stuck in have I gotten their breakthrough? When the first question they should ask themselves is, what is it that I'm really looking for? Taking a step back and just allowing the client to pause and say, hey, what is it that I really hope to gain out of this? What is it that I really hope to gain? And that pause, taking a step back, getting that moment just to ask that question, it's what I call thought provoking conversations. So in this picture, you see many little conversations that are happening. And this is true in all of us. In every day of our lives, we have many tiny conversations. I call them micro conversations that we're having with ourselves, with our loved ones, with the people around us. And these tiny conversations are micro conversations. And because there's so many conversations happening, a part of us says, I want A, I want B, or I'm thinking about what should I have for lunch, what should I have for dinner, should I go for this, should I go for that? But oftentimes, how many of us realize that whenever we face with this conundrum of multiple conversations within, we would always try to seek a resolution. We will always try to seek a place where we can come to kind of agreement or a compromise or like a place where we can just get the way out of there. So I give you a simple example. Recently, one of my clients told me, Jedi, I was just thinking, what should I eat for lunch? And I said, okay, what happened there? So the client told me, Jedi, I always wanted to try something different, but every time at lunch, I'm always going back to the same food. I'm always going back to that same choice that I'm used to when I wanted to try something totally different. So this client, so I asked the client, what happened? So I just tell the client, I say, share me more. And so the client says, so I went to this hawker center, or, this eatery place, and there are many different cuisines to choose from. However, I'm always going back to that chicken rice store. So for those of you who are not sure what chicken rice is this famous, delicious meal that you can find in Singapore. Really, really absolutely delicious, and it's a staple for most people. So this individual client said, Jada, I want to try something different. I want to kind of not always going back to the same thing. However, whenever I walk one round around the food court or that eatery, I'm always going back to that same comfort place. So there, I heard that word, going back to the same comfort place. And that gave me an idea and an insight, a learning. And that learning is this. In the midst of all the multitudes of conversations that we have within ourselves and around us, we always try to find that voice or that comfort voice that seems familiar to us, that familiar voice that gives us a sense of security. And so you see, it's not because we're not willing to try something new, but it's because we want that sense of comfort. We want that sense that I'm familiar with this and I don't want to push the boundary too far. And going back to that place where I'm familiar, where I'm confident, it's really where I want to be. And that is what the place where most conversations reside in. And so you see, why do I raise this picture about this many, many micro conversations that we have within ourselves? Because too often what we really want in those conversations, it's that light, it's that aha moment, it's that moment where we can say, hey, I think I can see the pathway. I think what really is that I'm looking for, it's not this, but what I really look for is that. So you see, what is happening here, it's that before we even address the solution or the answer or the result or the outcome, we first look back at how did this or where did this problem first arise, or why is this a problem for you in the first place? So, a thought provoking conversation first stimulates the space where we begin. So, we're not just kind of rush to get to a particular outcome, we are there to pause, take a step back, giving that moment a time, a space to just say, hey, you know what? Let's consider this. Let's take a step back. In the midst of all these micro conversations that's happening, what are we hearing? What are the trends we're hearing? What are the patterns we're hearing? What are the voices telling us? How are we feeling about that? What is happening for us on the inside? All these different micro conversations are what we call confusing us in a certain way, and we're seeking a way to find and navigate through them. And so, as such, a thought provoking conversation, it's one that helps us to declutter. You can think of thought provoking conversations as a form of decluttering that inner world inside. When our inner world it's cluttered with all the different voice, the conundrums, the bafflement, the inner conflicts that we face, what we're seeking for is that sense of clarity, the sense of resolution, the sense that we can find comfort in knowing what could be the next possibility. And oftentimes, if you think about this, it's not really the answers that we want, but it's that sense that someone has heard me, someone has identified with it, someone can identify with things that I'm going through. I'm not alone. I can feel that there could be some hope, there could be some possibility. If you think about this, whenever we face a challenge and we approach someone, it could be a leader, it could be a mentor, it could be a coach, it could be a parent, and we often raise this. And sometimes they just tell us the same thing that we already know. But yet, we just needed to hear that voice, that sense of reassurance, that sense of comfort, that space where it declutters the voice inside. And it sort of feels like in the midst of that, busyness, fogginess, haziness, that's that little light that pierces through, that we can see that clarity. And that it's where we begin the sense and experience of thought provoking conversations. So, what is a thought provoking conversation? Well, it's a conversation that creates a moment of pause, allowing us to stimulate reflection and create a shift in perspective. There are usually these three ingredients. The first ingredient is the ability to kind of take a moment just to take a step back. And if you think about this, one of the interesting conversation I had recently with one of my clients and one of my fellow coaches is that we were discussing the concept of the rabbit and the tortoise, the hare and the tortoise story. Sometimes the hare is going very, very fast, or the rabbit's going very fast. And the tortoise, in our minds, are the slow ones. And why is it that the tortoise oftentimes win the race? Well, my friend who owns many pets in her house, she tells me, see, Jedi, actually when I see my tortoises, they are very fast. When I kind of prepare some food for my other animals, when the tortoise hear that, or when they see that, or they sense that, they immediately want to grab onto the food very, very quickly. In that moment, a little insight came to mind. And I said, hey, that's kind of interesting. Because the reason the tortoise was fast, because it knew what it wanted. It was kind of laser focused on what is required. And as such, it was able to kind of grab and launch forward. Whereas the rabbit would just hop around, explore, 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 never quite knowing where the destination is. So you see, that moment of pause allowed the tortoise to just take a moment to say, hey, what is my focus? What's my focal point? What is it that I really want? And once it's clear, it's laser focused, it's locked on. So she tells me that, the whenever the tortoise knows that there's food there, it would try to fight for the food. So regardless of what's happening, it's always going towards that destination. So you see, it's because of its laser focus, we can see its speed eventually reaching the outcome that is desired. So that moment, it's where it's going to be critical and precious for that individual. So moments of pause, it's one of the key ingredients in facilitating that thought-provoking conversations. If a conversation, it's filled with conversations, filled with words constantly, and there isn't a gap to allow the individual to kind of pause, then we don't give them enough time to stimulate reflection. So you see that the second ingredient can only happen when we have the first ingredient of a pause. Once we have that moment of pause, we're able then to stimulate reflection. Have you had a conversation before with a friend or a colleague or a peer or a fellow team member or a client where we say something or when they say something and it's almost that awkward moment, we're not sure what to say next, and because we feel that that 1 second seems so deafening, we want to kind of fill it with something. So as such, we are so rushed to wanting to fill that gap, fill that void with some words, some expressions. And in that moment of pause, we say, hey, okay, we want to feel that words. And because we feel something, we feel that gap, we feel that space, with more words, more conversation, it prevents the other party from taking a pause to reflect on what they've just said. Most people, when they have a conversation, they need time to kind of take a pause back and reflect on what they've just said. And what I call, have you met people where they say something? What they're doing is they are expressing and they're thinking through. Even for all of us as well, sometimes as we express, we need to pause, we need to kind of reflect, and that space is important. And so we got to get comfortable with the uncomfortable feeling of that few seconds of silence in between. And that's really what coaching is about. Coaching, it's about creating deliberate moments where there's space, there's silence, there's pause, holding the person back to just say, hey, let's take a moment here. Let's take a moment. Let's kind of pause. I remember one time when I was in Japan and we were going really, really fast with our students and our learners in the coaching process. And I tell everyone, okay, say, hey, chodo mate, right? Take a little pause, right? Just mate mate. Just slow down a little bit. Let's consider this. Let's watch this. Let's observe this. In our world today, everything is about speed. Fast, 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 fast. But how many of us realize that speed oftentimes might not be the best solution? We seek efficiency, but at the expense of getting that quality. Have we seen that before? Yes. We've seen that in movies. We've seen that in blockbusters where they try to churn out many, many different movies, but they lack the quality. So if we want to have better quality of conversations, we need to start having quality moments where we can kind of reflect because what we want is to stimulate the reflection. When there's a pause, the natural effect is the stimulation of reflection and to incite a little shift in perspective. So in this picture, I show a little marble where there's inverse world that's happening there. So sometimes what needs to happen is for us to consider the perspective or consider the lens by which we observe things, the lens with which we see things. And so that shift in perspective, it's critical for us to kind of go deeper within ourselves and to allow us that moment to just say, hey, what's really happening for me? What's the change? What's that shift that's happening? That shift allows us to go deeper, allows us to take that moment to just consider all different aspects and angles. And that shift is important for us to go have that moment to consider what it really matters. So, these three ingredients first, the moment of pause that stimulates reflection, and next, that conversational space that supports that shift in perspective allows us to find and navigate through our little inner world. In the coming episodes, I'll be sharing with you how that works in a conversation process. I'll share with techniques and strategies. But before we get there, we first need to understand the reason, the rationale why we're doing things and why the shift is important. Because sometimes what we need is not a breakthrough. What we need is shift in perspective. Because sometimes clients come to me and say, oh, Jedi, I just need that break. I need the breakthrough. I need that progression. I need this. I need that. And I asked them, I said, why do you need that? And they would say, oh, Jedi, because you don't understand. All my friends, are changing their jobs at the second year or the third year. So I should change my job as well to follow the trend. And I asked them, I said, hey, why is it important for you to follow the trend? They said, oh, well, in the past, people change jobs every 5 years. Now it's about 2 to 3 years. And I think it's important for me to change my job 2 to 3 years so that I can get progression. So I asked them, I said, what matters to you and what is it that you're really looking for? Is it just a change of job? What is it that you're looking for? So that moment caused that person to just pause and say, hey, what is it that I'm really looking for? Is it a new position? Is it a new challenge? Is it a new pay? Is it a new salary? Is it a new experience? What is it they're really looking for? And that it's what thought-provoking conversations are all about. Creating that space to pause. But before we can do that, the initial conversations, it's what I call the map and the road. Okay, so let's take a look at this. The map and road, it's one of the most important elements in understanding and experiencing what it is to have a deep conversation. So you see, one of the things that we often fail to realize is people said, I want to get there. I should do this, I should do this. But they do not know what is their destination. So just like, many people come to me and say, Jedi, I need some career coaching, I need some career advice, I need some career mentoring, I need some this, I need some that. So they come to me and say, oh, should I change my job? Should I change my career? So they come to me asking for some advice. But what they're really looking for, it's not the advice. What they really are not telling me, it's that they hope to gain some clarity about where they should be or where they ought to be or where they want to be. And that is what we call the destination. So before we get on that road, we first need to identify what is the destination? Where's the map? Where do I want to be? The same thing for career. Just because everyone around you is changing their jobs every 2, 3 years, that doesn't mean you have to. But that doesn't mean you should not do that as well. Well, it depends on what is the destination that I'm really looking for. So once we have the destination in mind, then we can look at the map because there's no one straight path to the destination. Just like in our careers as well, it doesn't mean that if we have a degree, we can be successful. Success is not determined by a particular certificate. Well, it depends on what the destination is about. And once we are clear about the destination, then we have then to set the measures of success. Because 10 people could have the same destination, but the measure of success could be absolutely different for each one of them. I remember one time when I was with a group of people, and we were just traveling around. And most recently, we were traveling in Macau, and that was my first time, going to Macau. And it was really interesting because it was a blend of history, tradition, cultures, food, where I saw a lot of different historical sites. And what really intrigued me was when I saw everyone gathering at historical sites, taking lots of pictures. And I start seeing, so I was at one corner, somewhere at the St. Peter's Wall, at Cathedral Wall, and I noticed that every single person was taking pictures, and they were seeing the entire historical landmark through the lens of their phone and not just savoring in that moment. Right in front of them is that wall, but they're not savoring that moment. They're not enjoying what's happening, what's before them. They're looking, but they're not looking. Seeing, but not seeing. Hearing and not hearing. Tasting and but not tasting, experiencing but not experiencing. And that became a problem because everyone saw the same thing, but they don't see the same thing. What do I mean by that? So I remember that day when I saw that wall and I said, wow, it's really pretty, it's really beautiful. And I'm also, one that enjoys taking pictures. And so but the first thing is let's take a picture. Let's quickly take a picture. But then I reminded myself, I said, hey, let's take a pause as well. Let's zoom in, let's zoom out, let's be curious about this wall. And so what caught my attention was that there were engravings on the wall. And in one particular corner of the wall, there was a little acrylic kind of covering that is a transparent acrylic that was covering a slab of tile or slab of brick just by the side of the wall. And I was really curious. I said, hey, why is that acrylic piece? What is it protecting? Because it's not a entire concealment, it's just a little piece that's just in front of that brick. Upon closer inspection, I realized that there were engravings on that brick, and I could see that little fadiness, that little wear and tear, as a result of many people coming across that brick and touching the brick. And on that, I saw a little note that says that because of the wear and tear, because of people touching the brick, the inscriptions have been affected. As such, they put the acrylic piece to prevent further or the deterioration of that brick. And so what caught my attention is that that particular piece was right at the bottom, at the angle of our feet. And so most people they would just walk past, not noticing that there is such a thing. And at that moment, I was really, really curious. I said, "Wow, the historians or that the people who were in charge of restoring this or maintaining this historical site go through that extent, go through that extra mile to capture this important elements in essence to ensure that history is kept." And when I saw that, I said, hey, everyone was taking that grand picture, but the greatest piece of the history was found in the inscription. What happened there? The stories, the legacies. And so sometimes as we look towards our destination and we may see similar things, and what we want is to invite the clients to see from new angles, to consider from more perspective, and take in that destination from different angles and different vantage points before deciding what is the road that we like to get on. Because you see, the road we get on doesn't have to be a straight line. Because if our intention is to experience things as they are, or if our intention is to experience new possibilities, or if our intention is to get to the destination as quickly as possible, then it will shape the way we draw our journey map. Okay, so we're coming to that real important truth in just a while. So I want to share with three common misconceptions before I share with the secret of thought-provoking conversations. Now, the first common misconception is thought-provoking conversations are about giving advice. They're not. It's about generative conversations and not giving the answers. You see, the answers are simple. Today we have AI, we have Grook, we have ChatGPT, we have many, many different platforms that if you type the answers, type the question in, they can give you the answers or the advice immediately. What makes coaching different? It's not the advice that's important. We take a step back and identify what is that real problem? What's the problem underneath the problem? What is the destination they're really looking for? Through a series of questions, through a series of conversations to identify what it is that the clients are really looking for. And that it's what really matters. We're making conversation matters. We're making meaning matter. So a thought-provoking process, it's not about arriving at a solution or a answer. It's not about solution focus. It's not about results focus. It's about asking the first question. What is it? What do you hope to gain out of this? What is it that you want? What is it that you desire? What do you what is the result? What is the outcome that you intend for? First having the conversations before addressing the different layers of answers and possibilities that we can explore. The second common myth is that it has to be sophisticated, complex. We have to use words to make it sound sophisticated. In fact, in the recent years, I've seen many different coaching schools try to teach their learners very, very strange ways of asking questions or having conversations. They would say, "Oh, do not use the word why because why is a judgmental word." And so I begin to hear people say, "Oh, when, where, what," and they all have different meanings. So if you replace the word why to a different word like when, what, you would get a different syntax synthesis. You will get a different response. And so conversations should not be complex. It should be as simple as possible, as brief as possible, and not overly philosophical. When we try to make our statements sound very um intense, sounds very scholastic, sounds very philosophical. What it does, it only shows your ego. It only strokes your ego. It only shows you being higher than the other individual. Why do we need to show off what we do know? And oftentimes I say it here, the role of the coach is to make your conversations as palatable, as simple to the level of our clients. We have to come down to the level of the clients. If we're serving children today, we cannot use words that are sophisticated, that they cannot understand. If we're serving clients today, we have to match the level of the language that they're using. And we have to use as simple word as possible, as simple a phrase, well timed, simple, brief conversations, rather than complex stack questions. Now, why is that important? Because the big question is we want to facilitate that conversational space. It's not about showing off what we know, it's about showing up in that conversation. And that's more important. So the myth is not about trying to do more, it's about doing less and being more in that space, creating that space for the client to really shine. And that is more important. Third, the third common misconception is that they require immediate breakthroughs. It's not quite. It's not about trying to rush the breakthroughs. It's not about being forced to get a breakthrough. It's about realizing that thought-provoking process, it's a process. It's not a destination. Breakthroughs are not a point. It's a process. Very much like when we see a little chick hatching from the egg. The breakthrough didn't happen the moment the chick came out from the egg. The breakthrough was happening in the egg when the chick was developing. The little baby chicken was developing. The little baby bird was developing. And every break, every little crack on that little shell, it signifies the process is almost complete. And so, what I encourage coaches and leaders to see is that breakthrough is not a point; it's a process, it's a journey, and sometimes it may take several weeks, several years, several months. But be patient with the journey. Do not force the process. When we force the process, what comes out, it's a power of goo. But when we allow the process to take its natural seasonal course, what we end up having, it's a more sustainable outcome. You see, today, one of the things that in modern times we are lacking is the curiosity, the process of failing, the process of trying, the process of doing and experimenting. In the past, when things were still in its infancy stage, many people are open to just try, fail, and restart again. But today, we're so hesitant to try and fail. And as such, we don't build that resilience. We don't build that curiosity. Today, it's really, really strange when I start seeing schools teaching or even leadership courses teaching about creativity, when in fact, creativity is part of our nature. We as human beings are highly creative, but we have been impeded by our learnings. We've been impeded by the society around us. What we really need is that moment of pause, reflection, that space to say, hey, let's just put everything aside. Let's just slow down. And that has to do with the speed. So sometimes I often tell leaders, I said, you know, don't think of a coaching conversation as what is my tree outcome, what's my tree main learning. Stop looking at coaching conversations as a KPI. By certain number of sessions, I will get a breakthrough. If we start doing that, we get what we call a forced scramble egg. We're just forcing something out. And as such, you're not really experiencing the process. What needs to happen, it's rather than forcing the process, we need to be able to take that moment to go deeper, to allow that space to happen. It's not about trying to push and get things done. It's about creating that space where we can slow down, reflect, go deeper. And that is more important than just rushing things through. So faster, it's actually slower. Slower, it's actually faster. And the speed of thought, because we think so fast, we need this power of pause, just like this picture here. We need to deliberately press the pause button and ask ourselves, what would happen if we were to zoom out? What would happen if we were to take a moment just to shift our angle? Now, if we look at this picture, what do we see? For some people, they say, "Oh, I cannot see some greeneries, some darkness in this picture." But as we zoom out of this picture, we begin to have a broader field of vision. We get to see the entire park, the entire landscape. We begin to realize it's not dark. It was a bright daylight. The reason a picture appears dark, it's because we just we were so zoomed in a corner of the vegetation that it created an appearance of darkness when in fact it was bright daylight. So adjusting the field of view of vision is important to stimulate that conversational process. And that's really what thought provoking conversations are about. It's about creating meaningful conversations rather than forcing a technique on another person. It's about being present and listening with intention rather than trying to, show off what you do know, but show up in that conversation. And so, what I'll leave you here today as a way to think about our episode for today, it's what is a thought provoking conversation? It's one that stimulates moments where you can say, "Oh, wow, there are a lot of insights here, there are a lot of rich learnings and meaningfulness in that conversations. And I just feel like I want to take a note. So, what I always enjoy about conversations is that if it intrigued me enough to take a pause to write a note down, that is a powerful conversation. Even in listening to this podcast and this video series, I want you to encourage you to take moments where you can write notes, because one of the best process in creating this thought-provoking conversation, it's not one way. It's a co-created manner where you and I embark on this journey to say, hey, that is kind of interesting. Let me pen that thought down and let me go back to that thought. And it's also in re-listening as well. So, for example, a year from now, re-listen to this episode. 2 years from now, 5 years from now, re-listen to this episode, and you begin to gain insights that you never had before. You begin to gain learnings that you never knew about before. And the intention and intentionality of that listening will support you in growing deeper, in discovering who you are, and unraveling deeper insights for yourself and where you like to be. So if you enjoy what you listen today, I want to encourage you to continue to listen to this video series and this podcast series called The Coach Within. The Coach Within, it's all about helping you find that inner voice to support you in the areas of your careers, your life, your relationships, your leadership. It's all about helping you develop that powerful being, that coach within. All of us have a voice, and you have a voice as well to help you to gain that clarity that you need to be, unraveling the destination. In our next episode, what I'm going to be sharing is something really important. It's how do we create that moment of pause. We're going to take a step further to really unravel what it takes. What are the steps? What are the things that I can do practically to unravel each one of these layers? So continue to stay tuned because I will see you in the next episode. Thank you for tuning in to The Coach Within. If today's episode sparked something in you, take a moment to reflect, journal, or share it with someone who needs to hear it. Want to experience coaching or explore our upcoming programs? Head to Jedi.coach or check out our show notes to connect. If this podcast helped you to grow, please follow, share, and leave a review. It helps more people to find us. And until next time, keep listening, keep reflecting, and keep braving your story from within.